You're listening to Black Parents Aging, where we help you navigate caring for aging loved ones. Every Wednesday, we'll discuss how to help your parents successfully navigate this new season of life. We are going to talk about legal, health, technology, and finances. Here's your host attorneys, Olivia Smith and Nicola Robinson.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Black Parents Aging Podcast. It is your host, Nicola Robinson. I am so excited, guys. We have a special guest. Y'all know how I feel when we have guests. It makes me so happy that people want to hang out with me for our podcast. So, guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mia Chester. I'm with the Alter program and so excited to be with Nicola in the podcast today.
So I'm going to give y'all a little bit about Mia, and then we're going to get started with the show. Mia serves as the project coordinator for Alter program that works to build partnerships with churches anchored in African American communities to better support families affected by dementia. Mia has been in the healthcare industry since 2005 and has served in management as well as program and service coordination positions for older adult program populations throughout her career. She holds a master's degree in health studies from the University of Alabama. She has dedicated the past 12 years in service to the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter. Her role as program manager allows her to lead local initiatives for the Alzheimer's Association's community-based education programs and support. Mia is a native Atlantan and loves her city. Shout out to ATL. And these days, her hands are full because in June, she just welcomed a new baby boy, Baby Easton, and I am so excited. I cannot wait to meet Baby Easton. So welcome me into the show, everybody.
Thank you. So, happy to be here.
Mia is one of my go-tos when we talk all things Alzheimer's and dementia. Guys, y'all remember I had Dr. Epps on the show. Well, I got to meet Mia through Dr. Epps. And so we wanted to bring her on the show to continue the conversation. And I feel like every time I've seen Mia present, she goes into the science of it. She goes into the knots and tangles and the stuff that I had never even heard of. So I wanted her to kind of come on the show and science out a little bit so y'all can really understand like what is going on in our brains when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia. So Mia, just in case you hadn't heard the episode, so Dr. Epps kind of helped everybody to understand that when it comes to the umbrella of Alzheimer's and then dementia underneath it. But if you'll start us there and then we'll kind of jump into, the different science parts.
Yeah. So I think we often get questions about what's the difference between the words dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And I always tell people it's easy to think of the word flowers. So start there. Think of the word flowers. There are many different types of flowers, but most people would recognize a rose as the most common type of flower. So dementia is that general category such as flowers, and Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. So a person that has dementia is going to start experiencing challenges with problem solving, short-term memory, judgment, mood, and behavior. And when we begin to look at Alzheimer's disease, we see a person begin to, again, struggle with their memory, but it becomes a situation where it's fatal. So I always say that a person can have dementia, but it doesn't mean that they always go on to develop Alzheimer's disease. But if you have Alzheimer's disease, you definitely have dementia. So people need to take it seriously and remember that dementia is that, as Dr. Epps said, umbrella term. There's many different types of dementias, over 70 different types. And what we know is that in the African American community, we are most likely to be diagnosed with vascular dementia, which is related to a reduced blood flow to the brain. So, a history of strokes makes us more susceptible to vascular dementia. So, I always say just think of that umbrella or think of those categories flowers versus roses.
So that was new for me. Vascular dementia. Never heard of it. Now we
Mhm.
got, Take Back the Night. We got Alzheimer's awareness and all this other stuff. But it feels like to me there's a disconnect. And maybe it's because it's more likely African Americans are getting it, but nobody's talking about it. So tell us a little bit more about vascular dementia and just how that affects the brain.
Yeah, so I think why we don't hear a lot about vascular dementia is because Alzheimer's disease is pretty much at the forefront right now. There's a lot of research dollars being given to Alzheimer's disease, looking for either treatments or cures. And the other types of dementias, especially vascular dementia, has not gotten the focus that it needs. But again, we do see it affect our community a little bit more. And I do think it has something to do with underreporting, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So,
yes.
as African Americans, we don't sometimes take our symptoms seriously or think that it is something that we need to act upon. And so when we go to the doctor, it's kind of not too late, but much later in the disease progression. And so what I always say to people is that money and attention goes to those diseases that are reported and accounted for on death certificates. So we have to
Mm.
remember that. And so if somebody goes to the doctor and they expire or pass away, and their family never even mentions that they had a vascular dementia or it never comes up, it's not going to be listed on the death certificate as the primary cause of death. When
Especially if they never went to get tested, so they were never diagnosed.
right. And I think that is the cause of a lot of reasons why we don't hear a lot about it.
Mm,
So the other part is what we tend to see is when we don't control our chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Those things do lead us to be at more risk for vascular dementia. So I always say one of the best things that we can do is live a healthy lifestyle and really take heed to when people say to eat healthily, follow the DASH diet, which is
mhm,
dietary approaches to stop hypertension and
mm.
avoid fats as much as you can because those things are going to help people age healthily and reduce that risk of developing really any dementia going forward.
Wow. Okay. So you gave me some homework. I need to go look at my diet and clean out the cabinets. Because one of the things I found out from Dr. Epps that I did not, or I was not as aware of, was by the time we start seeing symptoms, these things have been going on in our body for a while. And
Hmm.
so I was like, wait, I'm 40 something. Y'all don't even know how old I am. Yeah, I'm
Right.
40 something. And so, a couple of years from now, I want to be in the best place possible. So I need
Right.
to really start now and making sure that I'm setting myself up for healthy, active aging where my brain is still intact. Mm.
Absolutely. And I think that a part of that is, and let me back up. When I first heard that, I've been working in the agent field for a long time. And when that statistic came out, or that just saying came out, that a person can have internal changes in the brain 20 years before a physical sign ever appears or a physical symptom ever appears, it makes you kind of take pause and say, wait a
Mhm.
minute. It makes you think about your family, who had it and who didn't. But it also gives you the opportunity. And I tell people that's a gift. Knowledge is a gift to you because it gives you the opportunity to make a change today. So if we know that those internal changes are taking place or have taken place in the brain, then let's start looking at four components that we can do now to live healthily, which is increasing social activity or social engagement. And we have to do that as creatively as we can in this day and age, via Zoom or FaceTime, things like that. Having a diet that is healthful, exercising. And I always tell people that when we talk about exercising, it's important to break a sweat when you do it. And
Okay.
sometimes we have to think about that because of our hair. So we have to be
Hmm.
very mindful of that. But you want to sweat, you want to perspire, you want to make sure that you are getting your heart rate up. That's the most important thing. And then that fourth and final component would be doing things that are going to be challenging for your mind. So most of us work, as caregivers or people that are just aging. We have a lot of hats to wear, but it's important to make sure that our brain health is at the forefront of our physical health as well. So I tell people before you go to bed, put your phone down and read. Do things that are going to be challenging. And reading is great because you have to retain that information. So
Hmm.
doing those things can help your brain stay healthy and hopefully ward off dementia for as long as possible.
That was excellent. So I wrote all that down because I got stuff to do. So tell people, because a lot of people may not have been exposed to the science. And I think I'm a nerd like that. So I
Mhm.
think I was very fascinated by the science part. So we're talking about brain health. We're telling people, and I think they may understand about, memory loss and things like that. But what's actually going on in somebody's brain as best as you can tell us to kind of share
Yeah.
with us what's going on.
So the one of the ways to think about it is if we were to have a picture of a healthy brain versus a brain with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, one of the things you will notice is one brain is full in size, and the brain with dementia or Alzheimer's is much smaller in size. So the
Mm,
key thing that you're going to see happen when a person develops dementia or Alzheimer's disease would be shrinkage of the brain. So, what we know is that we don't know why Alzheimer's disease happens in the brain, but we do know the hallmarks of it. And that happens to be that plaques and tangles build up in the brain and build up around our neuron forest. And it causes healthy neurons to break off and die. And that's why we see that severe shrinkage of the brain.
okay.
So if a person, and when we talked about uh, uh, scientists and healthcare professionals being able to identify changes in the brain, that's what they're looking for. The plaques that form on the end of the dendrites of the neurons, the tangles form around the neuron body. So they're looking for plaques and tangles, or you may have heard it from a professional, beta amyloid or tau. So those are the two things that we are searching for that is commonly found in a brain with Alzheimer's disease. And unfortunately, when they continue to spread throughout the brain, those neurons don't come back. However,
Mm,
we are hearing some research about elasticity in the brain and being able to not regenerate, but to rebuild some of those neurons. So there's some work there to be done. But for the most part, we know that the saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's
right.
what's happening. And again, the key is a healthy brain is going to be full in size. A brain with Alzheimer's disease is going to be much, much smaller due to those neurons breaking off and eventually dying.
Okay. So that's the science part, guys. Let's talk a little bit about the research part because I know that's where you spend some of your time too. It didn't surprise me, but it definitely made me pause in terms of our participation in the research. Now, we know that there is no cure,
Right.
but in terms of finding medication and things like that, talk a little bit about what that looks like, what African Americans are doing, if anything, to move the needle along in that area. Mm.
Well, I love talking about this because when I started working in this field, I mean, I had obviously the history of Tuskegee, information on Henrietta Lacks and things like that, but I had never thought about actually why, who was participating in the studies. And so working with different universities, but specifically Emory, I went to a conference one day and they were very like blunt about it. And one of the doctors there basically said, do you all know who participates in the studies? And so the audience, they continued to guess the answers. And she basically said no to everybody and said, the reason why we don't see a lot of diversity in studies is because mainly white males are the main participants in clinical research and trials. So I think that the history of the pain that we experienced is still there, but there's also this huge amount of misinformation around clinical studies and trials. And so one of the things that I was relieved about is that not all clinical studies or trials involve medication. There are a lot that do. I mean, obviously, that's one of the things we want to look towards is finding a cure or, having the appropriate treatment. But some of the studies look at, are services reducing stress levels in caregivers? Does sleep contribute to it? So a lot of them may just follow the person based on some prescriptive things that they need to do throughout the day. But there are so many options for people other than medications, because that's the first thing we hear. I don't want to add another medication. On the flip side of that, I tell people, you're not taking a medication made for you anyway. So when you don't participate and that medication doesn't work for you as you think it should, it's because we don't have the representation in those studies to know how it affects us in the Black community, because we aren't in the studies. So, and I know sometimes in politics, they say, if you don't vote, you can't complain. Well, it's kind of the same thing. If you don't participate in studies and know how that medication affects us, you can't really complain because we have not come to the table. And I do think we just have to come to the table.
That makes so much sense. For people who are listening, their parents, they want to encourage their parents to get involved in some studies, or they may be caregivers and they want to get involved in some of the studies. What are the steps? Where do they go? How do they even say, you know what, I want to do that. I want to help move the needle a little bit.
Well, again, there's so many different options. One of the most popular things that people could do is go online to clinicaltrials.gov, which is going to have a complete listing of studies. But if you are listening in the Atlanta area or beyond, there are Alzheimer's disease research centers throughout the country. And those are going to be the leaders in Alzheimer's disease research that's going on. And so locally, we have one here in Georgia where they lead current studies. So people can simply just call them or reach out to them. But there's also private studies going on. So I would say start with clinicaltrials.gov. You can always contact me at the Alter program and we can talk through what are some local resources that might kind of help you, guide you towards some of those clinical trials. And the key thing to remember, Nicola, is that you get to make the decision to participate or not. So just making the phone call doesn't enroll you. You get to kind of question them to see if it's a good fit for you. And if it's not, I say go to the next one. So there are a lot of options, and I would say start with what those studies are that are local. And then I always tell people this part too. Sometimes there's a financial benefit to them. It won't make you rich by but my mom is 70 and I just got her to participate in a stroke related study, and it was all by phone. So a student called her, asked her a series of questions it was demographic questions and then a series of questions specific to her health. And then 2 weeks later, she got a $25 gift card. So not that should be the incentive to participate, but that is there sometimes where there's transportation assistance if they're trying to get you to come to a clinic, or just for a simple thank you for participating.
So not only did she help move the research needle along, She also got some coins.
Yep.
And and all jokes aside, we are living in COVID, and we have done a podcast episode about social isolation. So
Mhm.
she got a chance to talk to this other person, keep her
Yep.
brain sharp to answer. So there's some wins that you may not even be thinking about by encouraging your parents to participate in something like that. So
Right.
they get to make a new
Absolutely.
friend and talk on the phone.
That's it. And
Hey,
that's a
we got
look
to
for my mom. That was like perfect because I want to say she met this student and they were talking in so much that they weren't even sticking to the questions. And I'm like, Mama, focus on the question. And that is a result of her being socially isolated. So that's a great thing to do is you're getting to meet people where we're not able to do that as much as we normally would.
All right. So listen, y'all, I'm gonna put all of my Mia's info in the show notes so that you can reach out, and then you're gonna go to those pages and convince your parents, or encourage your parents to see what kind of studies and research that opportunities might be available for them. Before we leave, and I should have probably asked you these questions at the beginning of the show because I don't want to leave on a Debbie Downer, but I definitely wanted you to share some statistics with people. When Dr. Epps was on the show, we said we were going to save that for you because I don't
Oh,
I don't think people really understand like how serious this is in terms of
yeah.
our community. I think we all kind of have these ideas of maybe knowing one or two people, or my great aunt, she was a little
Hmm.
crazy. And so we don't really understand the magnitude that this is affecting our community in, and how we really need to be paying attention. So give them some statistics, and I'll try to lighten it back up because I want y'all to
Okay.
be sad before we finish the show.
Right. So I think that's absolutely the right thing to do is we need to know what those statistics are so that we know what we're dealing with. And so one of the biggest things to remember is that Alzheimer's disease affects the African American community 2 times as much as it does our white counterparts. The thing about that is it affects us more, but we're less likely to receive a formal diagnosis. So we really need to do a better job of being proactive about our health, knowing that. And then the other statistic that's always shocking to me is that Alzheimer's disease is the sixth leading cause of death nationwide. But for African Americans, it's the fourth leading cause of death that are 65 and older. And so we need to,
Really?
yeah, and I think that's really important because you don't see that written a lot, but through just different research avenues and just doing research, that's something I've come across. And I just think it's important for us to share it because it's one of those things that it's there, but we don't talk about it again. And so
Mhm.
it's affecting our community at a higher rate, yet we're less likely to do anything about it. The other thing that I talk about is there are, 5.1 million people living with Alzheimer's disease, but I think that number is significantly higher because people don't report it. So if I
Mm.
had to say anything to people, those would be the top three to remember that, we're 2 times as likely to get it. It's the fourth leading cause of death. And then caregivers are at the epicenter of this disease. And together we can all make a difference if we're proactive about our brain health and if we find ways to support our caregiver.
So look, before we end, because we're getting close to the end, but let's talk about caregivers, because there's some caregivers probably listening to the show right now. And I've seen statistics about just the impact of caregiving and how that impacts their health, that impacts their quality of life, and even the length of their life by being a
Absolutely.
caregiver. So, talk a little bit about caregiving and dementia, and anything that you want to offer some caregivers that might be listening.
Yeah, I want caregivers to know first and foremost that it is a hard job, but you don't have to do it alone. I think
Hmm.
that we've come a long way with offering resources for caregivers, depending on where you live. There might be some local resources that have help with financial assistance. But my thing that I say to caregivers is you have to put your health first
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, as you said, we see the caregiver maybe pass away before the person they're caring for. And so we want to make sure that they are going to their doctor's appointments. So it's and making sure that their health is A1. So I always say, as much as caregiving is a selfless act, you have to be selfish when it comes to caring for yourself. And so in order to be a healthy caregiver, you have to put yourself first. And so resources I think that are helpful are respite programs in your area. If there are home health companies that can come in and assist with things like bathing that can be challenging or grooming, see what help you can get, because if you want to carry this on for as long as we know the disease lasts, anywhere from 3 to 20 years, you are on a long road, and you have to have support systems in place to help you be a healthy, valuable caregiver.
That was great. I mean, just great information. I told you, I'm taking all kinds of little notes right now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Any last words for the guests as they're listening? I really am trying to get our community to understand the gravity of this.
I will say what I want to do a call to action for the listeners.
Okay.
So I will say June is Brain Awareness Month. And so what we talk about is you can do it in June, but you can actually start now. You learn some things from this podcast and maybe from the other podcasts. Talk about it. Have those courageous conversations with your family. Talk about dementia or symptoms that you've noticed, because without talking about it, it gets brushed under the rug. So feel empowered from this, podcast to have those conversations and talk about things that you think are odd or bizarre for your loved one. And that's a great starting place.
You called it courageous conversations. I love that. I'm going to steal that. I'm telling you now. If people who are listening need to get a hold of you and they want to know more about the Alter program and even the work that you do with the Alzheimer's Association, how do they reach you?
So I actually am going to give out our Alter email. So it's Alter, ALTER, at gsu.edu. And then I can also be reached through my Alzheimer's Association programs through my email there, which is mchester, so my first initial last name, at alz.org. And I would encourage people to just email me, and I can either help you navigate this process, put you in touch with the right people and players, and really support you in this journey.
Well, thank you again for coming on the show. We are so delighted to have you. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have learned a lot. And guys, tune in next time for another exciting episode of Black Parents Aging. We love hearing from you guys. So continue to give us reviews, continue to leave us comments, continue to email us questions. This is a judgment-free zone. Whatever you got going on, you got questions, we will try to find you answers. So we look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for joining us this week on Black Parents Aging. Check out our Facebook group at Black Parents Aging, where we go live to answer your questions. For more info on today's topic, check out the show notes on our website, srlawgrp.com. If you know someone who could benefit from today's episode, please share a link to the show. Subscribe to the show to catch new episodes and leave a review. Until next week.